there are some signs that they're actually getting closer to be able to break through to the main Russian defensive lines. Because you've got to realize that the Russians have got lines after lines after lines, and therefore each one, there have to be minefields cleared, barriers taken away, and so forth, and all of this under fire. So we shouldn't have expected anything more quick. But the point is, from the Ukrainians' point of view, it may well be that they're getting closer to the point where they might start to unleash more of the forces they've kept in reserve. And these are the forces that are largely equipped with the kind of Western armor and a Western train. So we expect them to be able to be more effective. So, I mean, I think that we may well be coming to a rather more important moment in this counteroffensive, but we're not there yet.
Has been attacked by a drone again. It's the second time in 2 days. Russia's defense ministry is blaming Ukraine. An advisor to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia will see what he described as more unidentified drones. Let's have a word with Mark Galeotti, who's an intelligence and security expert and author of over 25 books on Russia and Eastern Europe. So, who do you believe is behind these drone strikes, Mark?
Oh, there's no real question but that Ukraine is behind them. I mean, look, each time there's an attack on Russian soil, at the time, the Ukrainians neither confirm nor deny. But then we then find a week or a month or 3 months later, they do. And given the pretty much sort of nod and a wink, oh, isn't it terrible? These sort of things are going to happen more often, statements that we've been getting from Kyiv, I think it's pretty clear who's behind them.
The fact that they can occur at all, it doesn't actually say a lot for Russia's defences, does it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the thing about these long-range drones is precisely, they are relatively stealthy, relatively quiet. They fly, or they can fly, really quite low to the ground. And therefore, it's actually quite hard to pick them up. I mean, in fact, no country's defenses really would be that secure against them. Once they come close to range, that's when they become vulnerable to being either shot down or, as is often the case, jammed through electronic warfare. So, I mean, in this respect, yes, of course, one would have thought that there'd be some kind of ring of steel around Moscow and its airspace. But, in practice, there's actually a limit to what can be done.
And how does it make Putin look? Isn't it increasingly difficult for him to pull off the whole strongman routine?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, from the point of view of the Ukrainians, this is a bit of a gamble. Because on the one hand, absolutely, it undermines his kind of claim to be able to provide security to Russians. And, if one thinks back to it, I mean, when he first became president way back at the end of 1999, beginning of 2000, there'd been a whole series of unexplained, quote unquote, apartment bombings, which very much kind of propelled him to power as a sense of this is a strong man who can actually defend people. So that becomes weaker. But on the other hand, there's also a danger that Russians actually will frankly get angry as a result. And although many of them don't really believe the kind of toxic propaganda that the Kremlin has been putting out, it may well be that once they start seeing their cities being hit by drones, they will say, oh, well, maybe Putin was right. And there is nothing we can do but to try and tame this rebellious neighbor.
Right. So what do we know then about the Ukrainian counteroffensive? How are things going?
There is progress. Look, it's slow progress. We have to acknowledge this. And it's obviously slower than the Ukrainians wanted, but also expected. There are some signs that they're actually getting closer to be able to break through to the main Russian defensive lines. Because you've got to realize that the Russians have got lines after lines after lines. And therefore each one, there have to be minefields cleared, barriers taken away, and so forth, and all of this under fire. So, we shouldn't have expected anything more quick. But the point is, from the Ukrainians' point of view, it may well be that they're getting closer to the point where they might start to unleash more of the forces they've kept in reserve. And these are the forces that are largely equipped with the kind of Western armor and a Western train. So we expect them to be able to be more effective. So, I mean, I think that we may well be coming to a rather more important moment in this counteroffensive, but we're not there yet.
And Prigozhin, I must confess, I've lost track here. Where is he? How is he? What's he up to?
Yes, I mean, this is the whole where's Wally of the age. We don't know for certain where he is right now. He was seen very recently in St. Petersburg, where Putin was hosting a rather shrunk iteration of his Russia-Africa summit. And it's clear that Prigozhin is going to be based in Belarus, but that absolutely one of the reasons why he's been given, well, frankly, his life, is exactly because Putin wants him to continue to operate Wagner in Africa, where it's it's a money earner, but also it's a form of political power projection for Moscow at a time when it has very few others. So, Prigozhin seems to be based in Belarus, but clearly able to travel back and forth and even have some kind of official standing in Moscow, which is not going down well with a lot of the military types and such like. But that's what Putin wants.
And the endless threats about going nuclear, they're still happening. Mercifully, not the nuclear attacks, but the threats to go nuclear. Do those threats concern you, or should we all learn to live with that kind of rhetoric?
I think we have to learn to live with that kind of rhetoric. And it's quite noteworthy that whereas once upon a time, Putin himself would, again, not directly, but by very, very broad hint, make these threats, ever since the Chinese leader Xi Jinping came to Moscow earlier this year and pretty much read Putin the Riot Act, the Chinese absolutely don't want to see the nuclear taboo broken. Instead, Putin has kept away from this, and it was his former prime minister and sort of puppet president, Dmitry Medvedev, who is an increasingly ridiculous figure, who has been issuing these sort of totally outlandish threats. And in a way, that's his job. His job is now to be the scarecrow figure rather than someone we really need to take seriously.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. That's Mark Galeotti.
It's 25.